The world was old, but the morning was new. For the dinosaurs, it was just another day under a sun they'd known for millions of years. But today the sky was different. It hung heavy and thick, a murky veil that seemed to press down on the vibrant greens of the Cretaceous. A young triceratops, barely old enough to have felt the turn of many seasons, ambled through a sea of ferns. The usual morning chorus was gone. The birds, those feathered descendants of older dinosaurs, were eerily silent. A deep unease settled over the land, a tension you could almost taste in the air. The triceratops paused its grazing, its massive head lifting, frill twitching. Something was wrong. The ground beneath its three-toed feet gave a sudden, violent shudder. It wasn't the familiar rumble of a distant volcanic eruption or the heavy tread of a tyrannosaurus on the hunt. This was deeper, more profound. A second tremor followed, a jarring pulse that felt like the planet's own heartbeat faltering. The triceratops let out a low, nervous bellow, a sound that was swallowed by the strange quiet. Other herbivores in the distance stopped their feeding, their heads raised in unison, scanning the horizon for a danger they couldn't see but could feel in their very bones. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Thousands of miles away, across the vast, warm ocean, an unimaginable event had already occurred. A point of light, more brilliant and terrifying than 1,000 suns, had seared the sky. It was a silent messenger of doom, traveling faster than sound, faster than anything the world had ever known. Here, in the heart of the continent, the only sign was a subtle shift in the breeze. A new scent wafted through the humid air, a sharp, metallic tang, utterly alien. It was the smell of rock vaporized into gas, of an element from the stars, iridium, now dusting the atmosphere. The young triceratops sniffed the air, its nostrils flaring. The instinct to flee, primal and overwhelming, surged through it. It didn't know from what or to where, but it knew it had to run. The world was beginning to unravel. Panic began to ripple through the herds. The sense of wrongness was no longer a subtle feeling. It was a palpable threat. Ankylosaurs hunkered down, their clubbed tails twitching nervously. Flocks of pterosaurs, usually soaring gracefully on thermal currents, wheeled chaotically in the sky, shrieking in confusion. The metallic scent grew stronger, a harbinger of the change to come. The sky, once a familiar blue or gray, was beginning to take on a sickly, brownish-orange hue at the edges of the horizon. It was a color no living creature on Earth had ever witnessed. The sun, their life-giving star, seemed to dim, as if a great shadow was being cast from an impossible height. And then the sound arrived. It wasn't a roar or a crash. It was a concussion, a wave of pressure that slammed into the world. It flattened forests of giant conifers as if they were blades of grass. The pressure wave ripped through the herds, a physical blow that sent creatures tumbling. The young triceratops was knocked from its feet, its heavy body rolling in the dirt. Dazed and disoriented, it struggled to rise, its ears ringing with a sound that had no source and no end. The sky was no longer just a strange color. It was a canvas of chaos. Dark clouds, unlike any storm clouds, were boiling upwards, roiling with an unnatural energy. What followed was a rain of fire. Tiny glass beads, formed from molten rock blasted into the upper atmosphere, began to fall. They weren't like rain or hail. They were superheated spherules that ignited the dry foliage on contact. Fires erupted spontaneously across the landscape. The fern meadows, the cycad groves, the towering forests, everything began to burn. The air, already thick with the metallic scent, now filled with acrid smoke. The world was being consumed by a global firestorm. For the dinosaurs, there was nowhere to hide. The very air they breathed was turning to poison, the ground beneath them to ash. The young triceratops, caught between the suffocating smoke and the advancing walls of flame, ran blindly. Its primeval instincts were useless against a threat that came from the sky itself. As the fires raged, the sky grew darker still. The sun vanished completely, blotted out by a thick blanket of soot and ash that was now encircling the globe. Day turned into an endless, terrifying night. A profound cold began to set in, a long winter descending in a matter of hours. The roaring fires were eventually starved of oxygen and began to die down, leaving behind a charred, smoldering wasteland under a perpetually dark sky. The temperature plummeted. Creatures that had evolved for a warm, stable climate were now exposed to a sudden and brutal ice age. Those that survived the initial blast wave and the firestorm now faced a new, slower death from cold and starvation. The foundation of life was crumbling. With no sunlight reaching the surface, photosynthesis ceased. Plants withered and died on a massive scale, from the tiniest algae in the oceans to the mightiest trees on land. The herbivores, like our young triceratops, found their world stripped of food. Starvation became the great filter. The powerful jaws of the tyrannosaurs, evolved to crush bone, were useless when there were no more prey to hunt. The intricate food web, built over tens of millions of years, collapsed in a matter of weeks. The titans of the land, the largest animals ever to walk the earth, were brought to their knees by the absence of a single star's light. Their size, once their greatest advantage, now became their fatal flaw, their immense bodies demanding fuel that no longer existed. In the aftermath, the world was a ghost of its former self. A silent, gray dust, a mixture of soot, pulverized rock, and the alien iridium from the asteroid settled over everything, a funeral shroud for a lost world. This thin layer of clay, visible in the geologic record today, marks the precise moment the world changed forever. It is the tombstone of the dinosaurs. For months, perhaps years, the sun remained hidden. When it finally broke through the haze, it shone upon a transformed planet. The great dinosaur herds were gone. The mighty predators were gone. The skies were empty of the great leathery-winged pterosaurs. Over 75% of all species on Earth had been wiped out. But in the quiet devastation, new opportunities arose. Life, ever resilient, found a way. In the shadows of the fallen giants, small, furry creatures had survived. Mammals, who had lived for millions of years in fear of the dinosaurs, had weathered the storm. Their small size meant they needed less food. Many were burrowers, able to escape the worst of the fire and cold. Their warm blood gave them an edge in the freezing darkness. As the planet slowly began to heal and new plants took root, these survivors emerged from the shadows. The age of reptiles had ended in fire and darkness, and from its ashes, the age of mammals was about to begin. The sky that brought about the end for the dinosaurs was the very same sky that cleared the way for us. It was a catastrophic ending, but also a spectacular new beginning. 66 million years ago, a king ruled the land. His name was Tyrannosaurus Rex, the tyrant lizard king, and his kingdom was a world of lush green forests and sprawling floodplains. He was the apex, the ultimate predator, a 40-foot, 9-ton marvel of evolution. His roar was the law of the land, a sound that sent tremors not just through the ground, but through the very hearts of every creature that heard it. For millions of years, his kind had reigned supreme, their dominance absolute, their future seemingly endless. But on one particular day, the last day of the Cretaceous period, the king would face a threat not of flesh and bone, but from the cold, indifferent cosmos. This is the story of that day. This is the story of the last roar of the tyrant king. Our story begins in the humid, misty morning of what would become a world-altering day. The great Tyrannosaurus Rex, a magnificent bull in his prime, moved with a purpose that was both terrifying and majestic. His massive legs, each step a testament to his power, carried him along the edge of a dense fern-covered forest. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, cycads, and the promise of a hunt. His gaze, sharp and intelligent, scanned the landscape. His world was a familiar tapestry of sounds and smells, a rhythm he knew intimately. He was the conductor of this prehistoric orchestra, and his hunger was the driving beat. But this morning, the rhythm was off. Something was dissonant, a note of anxiety played across the land. The usually scattered herds of Edmontosaurus, the great duck-billed hadrosaurs, were clumped together in tight, nervous bunches near the riverbank. They weren't grazing peacefully. Their heads were up, their wide eyes scanning the skies, their calls low and filled with unease. They were prey, and their fear was a language the T-Rex understood better than any other. Yet their fear wasn't directed at him. He stood partially concealed by the giant ferns, a mountain of muscle and teeth, and they barely seemed to register his presence. This was wrong. Even the smaller predators were acting strangely. A pair of Dacataraptors, usually cunning and silent hunters, were engaged in a pointless, snarling squabble on a nearby ridge. They snapped and shrieked at each other, not over a carcass, but seemingly at nothing at all. It was as if a collective madness had descended upon the valley. The T-Rex let out a low, guttural growl of annoyance. The disruption irritated him. It spoiled the hunt. He took a step forward, his colossal foot crushing a tree fern with an indifferent crunch. He was the king. His presence should have restored order, sent the prey scattering in a predictable panic. But it didn't. The world remained stubbornly out of tune. He shook his massive head, a motion that sent a small shower of dust and leaf litter cascading from the heavy, keratinous crests above his eyes. As he did, he felt it. A deep, resonant tremor that vibrated up through the solace of his feet, through his dense leg bones, and into the very core of his being. It wasn't an earthquake. He'd felt plenty of those. This was different. It was a low, sustained rumble that seemed to come not from beneath the earth, but from the horizon itself. It was a sound without source, a feeling more than a noise. The birds, the small pterosaurs roosting in the treetops, took to the air in a single, panicked cloud, their cries sharp and piercing. The T-Rex stood motionless, his head cocked, his senses on high alert. He was a creature of instinct, a being honed by millions of years of survival. Every fiber of his being, every primal impulse screamed at him, danger. This was a danger unlike any he had ever known. It wasn't the scent of a rival male, the challenge of a triceratops, or the desperation of starving prey. This was something other, something alien, something that didn't belong in his world. He raised his head to the sky and unleashed a roar. But this roar was different from his usual proclamations of dominance. It wasn't a challenge or a threat. It was deeper, more resonant, a sound that seemed to carry a question. It was a roar of warning, a desperate attempt to impose his will upon a world that was suddenly refusing to listen. The sound boomed across the valley, a thunderous wave that silenced the panicked calls of the lesser creatures. For a moment, the forest held its breath, waiting for the king's power to reassert itself. Leaves, dislodged by the sheer force of the roar, fluttered down around him like green confetti. But then, the ground shook again, harder this time. The rumble grew louder, a continuous, deafening groan that seemed to be tearing the sky apart. The king stumbled, his powerful legs struggling to maintain balance on the quivering earth. He looked around, a profound confusion clouding his predatory certainty. What was this? What could shake the world with more force than his own tread? What could make a sound louder than his own roar? His gaze was drawn upward, toward the hazy blue canvas of the sky. And there he saw it, a new star. A star where no star should be, visible in the full light of day. It was a tiny pinprick of brilliant, unnatural light, and it was growing. It glowed with a terrifying intensity, a white-hot spark against the familiar blue. He stared at it, his brain, designed to track the subtlest movements of prey, struggling to comprehend what he was seeing. This object didn't move like a bird or a pterosaur. It simply grew, becoming brighter and larger with every passing second. A strange, ethereal tail of smoke and light began to trail behind it, painting a horrifying scar across the heavens. The Tyrant King had never known fear. He was the embodiment of power, the pinnacle of nature's brutal artistry. He had faced down rivals that matched his size and fury, hunted prey that could kill with a single, well-aimed horn. Fear was what he inspired in others. It was the scent that led him to his next meal. But in this moment, staring at the growing light in the sky, a new, cold sensation seeped into his ancient consciousness. It was a deep, primal dread, an understanding that transcended thought. It was the instinctual knowledge that some forces were beyond challenging, that some powers could not be fought. It was the terrifying realization that even kings could fall. The air grew hot. A strange wind, carrying the scent of ozone and burning rock, swept through the forest, bending the giant trees. The light in the sky was no longer a star. It was a sun, a second sun, blazing with an impossible, blinding fury. The king took an involuntary step back, his great body tensing. The rumble from the horizon had become an all-consuming physical presence, a pressure that squeezed the very air from his lungs. He could feel the heat on his scaly hide, a searing warmth that promised annihilation. He looked at his kingdom one last time. He saw the terrified herds, the scattering predators, the ancient forest that had been his dominion for his entire life. It was all about to be erased. He didn't understand why or how. His mind could not grasp the concept of an asteroid, of an impact event, of global extinction. He only knew that the sky was falling and the world was ending. With the last of his strength, facing the impossible light, the Tyrannosaurus Rex did the only thing he knew how to do. He planted his feet, arched his mighty neck, and let out one final, magnificent roar. It was not a roar of warning or confusion. It was a roar of defiance, a roar of rage. A roar against the dying of the light. It was the roar of a king who, even in the face of oblivion, would not be silent. It was the last sound he would ever make, a final, thunderous cry of existence before the sky turned to fire and the world he knew was silenced forever. The first light of dawn spills across the ancient world, painting the endless sands in shades of amber and rose. Atop the crest of a dune, a lone figure stands silhouetted against the rising sun. It's a Sinosauropteryx, no bigger than a house cat, but every inch a hunter. Its body is covered in a coat of fine, downy protofeathers, striped in rust red and white along its long tail. Last night's hunt was successful. A small lizard, still digesting, provides a sense of contentment. But satisfaction is a fleeting luxury in this world. An unfamiliar disquiet prickles beneath the feathers, a low hum of wrongness that defies the peaceful morning. The air is still, yet it carries the ghost of a sound deep, distant rumbling that feels more like a pressure in the chest than a noise heard by the ears. It's not the familiar growl of thunder from a passing storm. The sky above is a flawless, crystalline blue, empty of clouds. The Sinosauropteryx cocks its head, its sharp, intelligent eyes scanning the horizon. The ground beneath its three-toed feet shivers, a subtle tremor that isn't from any approaching herd. It's deeper, more profound, as if the very bones of the earth are groaning. Suddenly, a wave of panic erupts from the distant river valley. A massive flock of pterosaurs, startled from their treetop roosts, launches into the air. Their leathery wings beat the air in a frenzy, and their sharp, terrified cries echo across the landscape. They don't circle or soar. They flee, a chaotic swarm desperate to put distance between themselves and something unseen. This is not the behavior of animals spooked by a predator. This is primal terror. The little dinosaur flattens itself against the sand, its body tense. It emits a low, guttural hiss, a sound of pure instinctual alarm. The unease it felt before has now sharpened into a blade of genuine fear. Every fiber of its being screams that a danger beyond its comprehension is near. Without a second thought, it abandons its high perch. Its powerful legs pump, kicking up plumes of sand as it scrambles down the dune's steep face. The familiar safety of the undergrowth at the dune's base is its only goal. It dives into the tangled mess of ferns and cycads, the cool, damp leaves a welcome shield. It peeks out from its hiding place, heart hammering against its ribs. And then it happens, the horizon flashes. It's not lightning. It's a silent, searing blast of light that outshines the sun itself, bleaching the world white for a terrifying eternal second. The distant mountains, which have stood for millions of years, are briefly rendered as stark, black skeletons against this impossible glare. The light is so intense it feels hot, even from this distance, a wave of warmth that passes through the foliage. Then comes the silence, a heavy, pregnant pause that seems to suck all the air from the world. The birds have stopped chirping, the insects have gone quiet. The entire planet seems to be holding its breath. The little Sinosauropteryx stays frozen, hidden in the green shadows, its bright eyes wide with a terror it cannot name. It saw no giant beast, no rival predator. But it knows, with a certainty that chills it to the bone, that the world it knew just a moment ago is gone forever. Something has arrived, something vast and final, and the age of reptiles is about to end in fire and dust. The ground begins to shake again, this time not a subtle tremor, but a violent, rolling convulsion. The trees around its hiding spot whip back and forth as if in a hurricane. The roar finally arrives, a sound so immense it's not just heard but felt, a physical force that tears through the air and pulverizes the silence. It is the sound of the sky falling, of mountains being vaporized, of an entire world being broken. Dust and debris begin to rain down, not the gentle particles of a sandstorm, but hot ash and tiny, superheated pebbles that sizzle as they land on the damp leaves. The sky, once a brilliant blue, is rapidly darkening, choked by a colossal plume of smoke and earth that is climbing miles high, blotting out the sun. Day is turning into an unnatural, terrifying twilight. The Sinosauropteryx, the feathered watcher, can only press itself deeper into the earth, a tiny, living witness to the apocalypse. Its world of sun-drenched hunts and cool nights is being unwritten. It has survived countless dangers in its short life, larger predators, flash floods, territorial disputes. But this is different. This is not a challenge to be outsmarted or a predator to be outrun. This is an extinction event, an astronomical hammer blow that will reset the course of life on Earth. Through the darkening gloom, a new kind of rain begins to fall. Small, glassy spheres, once molten rock from the impact site, cool as they plummet back to Earth. They clatter through the canopy like hail, a deadly, beautiful, and terrible omen of the long winter to come. The little hunter, a marvel of evolution, a warm-blooded, feathered link between the dinosaurs and the birds that will one day rule the skies, is now just a refugee in its own home. It saw the flash, it heard the roar, and it felt the world die. Its future, and the future of all its kind, has just been decided by a rock from the heavens. As the long, cold darkness settles, its story becomes one of survival against impossible odds. A faint flicker of life in a world plunged into an endless night. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more stories from Deep Time. Picture this 66 million years ago in what we now call North America. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and pine. A colossal herd of Edmontosaurus, dinosaurs stretching as far as the eye can see, is on the move. This isn't just a casual stroll. It's the Great Migration, an ancient ritual etched into their very DNA. For thousands of generations, their ancestors have walked this same path. A journey of survival that separates the seasons. Leading the charge are the experienced matriarchs, their leathery skins scarred from countless seasons and close calls. Beside them, young Edmontosaurus, barely a few months old, stumble on clumsy legs. They look to their mothers for every cue, their wide eyes filled with a mixture of excitement and nervous energy. The ground itself seems to hum, a deep, rhythmic tremor created by tens of thousands of three-toed feet pounding the earth. Every step is a beat in the great drum of life. The herd leader, a magnificent bull with a distinctive crest, suddenly halts. He lifts his massive head, his nostrils flaring as he tests the wind. He smells something. Something wrong. It's a scent like smoke, sharp and acrid, but there are no forest fires on the horizon. The sky is a perfect, brilliant blue. The other adults grow quiet, sensing his unease. The low, guttural calls that usually fill the air die down, replaced by an expectant silence. What has their leader detected? Without warning, a low, powerful rumble travels through the ground, different from their own footsteps. It's a deep, gut-wrenching vibration that makes the very bones in their bodies resonate. It's not an earthquake. They know what those feel like. This is something else, something alien. Across the plains, flocks of primitive birds erupt from the trees, screeching in panic as they scatter into the sky. The smaller creatures of the undergrowth, the mammals and lizards, dart for cover, their instincts screaming at them to hide. The Edmontosaurus herd stands frozen, a sea of confusion. The ancient migratory path has never felt like this. Then, a sudden, violent jolt throws many of the dinosaurs off balance. It's as if the entire planet has been struck by a giant hammer. The shockwave ripples across the landscape, visible as it disturbs the tall grasses. Pandemonium erupts. The herd's discipline shatters. Some, driven by pure terror, break into a frantic, blind run in any direction. Others remain paralyzed, their minds unable to process the sensory overload. Calves cry out for their mothers, their high-pitched calls lost in the rising cacophony of panicked bellows. The wise old leader tries to restore order. letting out a booming call to rally his herd, but his voice is drowned out by the growing roar from the world itself. He looks toward the horizon, toward the direction of their ancestral breeding grounds. But what he sees stops him cold. A shadow is growing, rising from the edge of the world. It's not a cloud. It's a colossal wall of dust and debris, climbing higher and higher into the atmosphere, beginning to blot out the sun. The brilliant blue sky is turning a sickly, ominous shade of orange and gray. The temperature begins to plummet. The warm, late Cretaceous air is rapidly replaced by a sudden, unnatural chill. The dinosaurs, built for a balmy world, shiver. The dust wall on the horizon isn't just rising. It's expanding, racing toward them at an impossible speed. It's a tidal wave made of earth and fury, unleashed from an impact thousands of miles away in the Gulf of Mexico. Of course, they don't know that. All they know is that the world has turned against them. Some of the Edmontosaurus, desperate to escape, continue their mad dash forward, right toward the river valley that was their destination. But the journey is now a death trap. The continuous, violent tremors have destabilized the cliffsides. Tons of rock and earth begin to slide, creating massive landslides that cascade down into the valley, blocking the very path they needed to cross. The river itself, once a source of life-giving water, is now churning violently, its banks collapsing. There's no way forward. The herd is trapped. Behind them, the apocalypse is catching up. In front of them, the path of their ancestors is destroyed. The sky grows darker and darker, plunging the world into a perpetual twilight. The sun, the source of all life, has vanished behind a thick, impenetrable shroud of ash. Pinpricks of light begin to streak through the darkened sky-not stars, but white-hot ejecta, fragments of the asteroid and the Earth's crust, raining back down. As they hit the atmosphere, they ignite, turning the air into a superheated oven and sparking continent-spanning wildfires. The smell of smoke the leader detected earlier wasn't a phantom. It was the herald of a global firestorm. The world is burning. The air, once rich with oxygen, becomes toxic, choked with sulfur and soot. The dinosaurs' massive lungs, so efficient just hours before, now struggle to draw a clean breath. They gasp and choke, their eyes burning from the acrid air. In the terrifying gloom, the herd fragments completely. Families are torn apart. The young, separated from their mothers, cry out in the darkness, their calls unanswered. The great matriarchs and the powerful bull, who had guided and protected their kind for so long, are now just as helpless as the youngest calf. Their instincts, honed over millions of years of evolution, are useless. There is no playbook for the end of the world. This wasn't a failure of instinct. It wasn't a predator or a famine or a flood that stopped them. It was a cosmic event of unimaginable scale. The Great Migration, a cycle of life that had defined this species, was never finished. The herd that marched with such purpose and power just that morning was now scattered, disoriented, and dying. They were witnesses to the final moments of their reign, standing confused on a dying planet as the world that had nurtured them for eons was unmade in a matter of hours. Their journey ended here, not in the lush breeding grounds of their ancestors, but in the twilight of the dinosaurs. Imagine soaring high above the endless blue, a creature of myth and majesty, the master of the skies. This is the world of the pterosaur, a magnificent flying reptile that ruled the air 66 million years ago. With a wingspan that could rival a small airplane, these giants glided on thermal updrafts, their shadows dancing over the vast, ancient oceans. They were the undisputed kings of the prehistoric firmament, a testament to nature's incredible power of creation. Our story begins with one such giant, a Quetzalcoatlus, perhaps one of the largest flying animals ever to exist. Let's call him Sky King. His home was the sky, his domain the wind. For years, he had traced the patterns of the air currents, navigated by the sun and stars, and hunted the fish that schooled in the shallow seas below. His life was a symphony of effortless flight, a dance between gravity and the lift of his enormous, leathery wings. He knew the sky better than any creature on Earth. He understood its moods, its tempers, its gentle whispers, and its furious roars. The air was his ally, his playground, his entire world. On this particular day, Sky King was gliding over what would one day become the Gulf of Mexico. The sun was warm on his back, the air currents familiar and comforting. Below him, the turquoise water teemed with life. Plesiosaurs with their long, graceful necks hunted in the depths, while schools of fish glittered like scattered jewels near the surface. The world was as it had always been, a vibrant, thriving paradise under a serene blue sky. Sky King felt the familiar pang of hunger and began to circle, his keen eyes scanning the water for the telltale shimmer of a meal. But then something changed. It started subtly, a strange vibration in the air, a wrongness that prickled at his primal instincts. The warm, steady updraft he was riding began to feel turbulent, hotter, unpredictable. Sky King was a master of the air, yet this was a language he did not understand. He tilted his wings, trying to find a stable current, but the air itself seemed to be twisting, writhing with an unseen energy. He let out a low, guttural call, a sound of confusion that was lost in the vastness of the sky. Suddenly, a light bloomed on the horizon. It was not the gentle orange of sunrise or the fiery red of sunset. This was a flash of pure, blinding white, brighter than 1,000 suns, that seared itself onto the world. It exploded silently beyond the curve of the earth, a terrible, beautiful flower of destruction. For a brief, eternal moment, the world was bathed in this impossible light. Sky King, high above the ocean, was one of the first witnesses to the end of his era. Seconds later, the shockwave hit. It wasn't just wind. It was a physical wall of force, a wave of compressed air that traveled faster than sound. The wave slammed into Sky King, tossing him through the sky like a leaf in a hurricane. His massive wings, which had commanded the air for so long, were now useless against this invisible onslaught. He tumbled end over end, his body battered, his senses overwhelmed. He screeched, a sound of pure terror and disbelief, as the sky he had always trusted turned into a violent, chaotic enemy. With a monumental effort of will and muscle, he managed to regain some semblance of control. He flapped his wings frantically, fighting to stay airborne, to find some pocket of stable air, but there was none. Below him, the world was in chaos. The ocean, once a placid blue sheet, bulged upwards in a terrifying, unnatural dome as if a colossal fist had punched it from beneath. The impact of the asteroid, hundreds of miles away, had sent a seismic shockwave through the planet's crust, displacing an unimaginable volume of water. The sea then recoiled. Currents, once predictable, now twisted into monstrous whirlpools. Giant waves, hundreds of feet high, began to race outwards from the point of impact. Fish, plesiosaurs, and all manner of sea life were tossed about, their world turned into a churning cauldron of death. The very ground beneath the ocean was groaning, shifting, breaking apart. Sky King, fighting for his life in the sky, could only watch in horror. The air grew thick with debris, superheated dust and rock thrown thousands of miles into the atmosphere by the impact. It began to rain not water, but molten glass and burning rock. These tiny, fiery projectiles pelted Sky King's leathery wings, searing his skin, each impact a small agony. The air he was breathing became scorching hot, burning his lungs with every desperate gasp. This was no longer a storm. A storm is a part of nature, a cycle. This was an unmaking. The rules of the world had been broken. The sky, his sanctuary, had become a furnace. The sea, his hunting ground, had become a boiling abyss. He flapped harder and harder, his powerful muscles screaming in protest. He was flying blind, disoriented, driven by the simple, primal instinct to escape. But where could he go? The entire world was ending. He was not alone in his terror. Below, on the landmasses, the dinosaurs looked up. The Triceratops, the Ankylosaurs, even the mighty Tyrannosaurus Rex, paused their daily routines of grazing and hunting. They saw the sky turn from blue to a terrifying, permanent twilight, lit only by the incandescent glow of re-entering debris. They felt the ground shake so violently it was impossible to stand. The forest, their home, began to ignite, spontaneous fires erupting everywhere as the heat pulse from the impact swept across the continent. Back in the sky, Sky King's strength was failing, his wings were torn and burned. His body was bruised from the initial shockwave. The air was a toxic, superheated soup that offered no lift, only pain. For the first time in his life, this magnificent creature, this king of the air, could not fly. He began to fall. As he spiraled down from the heavens, his journey was a tragic survey of the apocalypse. He saw the coastline being obliterated by the mega tsunami, a wall of water 1,000 feet high erasing everything in its path. He saw the forest burning, a funeral pyre for an entire ecosystem. He saw the creatures of his world, the great and the small, consumed by fire, flood, and fury. The sounds were a symphony of destruction, the roar of the tsunami, the crackle of a world on fire, the terrified cries of countless animals. His final descent was slow, a graceful fall from a world that no longer had a place for him. He had spent his life riding the currents, mastering the winds, living in the embrace of the sky. Now that same sky was casting him out. He saw the churning, boiling water rushing up to meet him. There was no more screeching, no more struggle. There was only a profound, world-ending silence in his mind as he accepted his fate. Sky King hit the water. The master of the air was consumed by the raging sea. His story and the story of his kind ended in that moment of cosmic violence. He was just one of countless trillions of lives extinguished in one of the most catastrophic events in our planet's history. The Chicxulub impact didn't just kill the dinosaurs. It reset the course of life on Earth. In the days, weeks, and years that followed, the world was a dark, cold place. The sun was blocked out by a thick blanket of dust and soot, plunging the planet into a nuclear winter. Plants died. Herbivores starved, and the carnivores that fed on them soon followed. The age of reptiles, which had lasted for more than 150 million years, was over. But life, as it always does, found a way. From the ashes of that global catastrophe, new forms of life emerged. In the shadows, small, furry creatures that had survived the apocalypse began to thrive. Our distant mammalian ancestors, the fall of the dinosaurs, the final, tragic flight of creatures like our Sky King, cleared the stage for the rise of mammals, and eventually, for us. So when you look up at the sky, think of the pterosaurs. Think of these magnificent kings of the air, who soared where we now fly in our metal birds. Their story is a powerful reminder of the fragility of life and the immense, unpredictable power of the cosmos. Their final flight was not just an ending, but a violent, spectacular, and necessary beginning for the world we know today. 100 million years ago, long before the first human ever walked the earth, the world was a very different place. It was a world ruled by giants, a world of lush, green forests that pulsed with life. This is the story of one of those forests, and the day it fell silent. Our story begins in a vast, sprawling jungle during the late Cretaceous period. Towering ferns, some as tall as modern-day houses, formed a dense canopy overhead. Sunlight struggled to pierce through, dappling the forest floor in shifting patterns of light and shadow. The air was thick and humid, heavy with the scent of damp earth, decaying leaves, and strange, exotic blossoms. Normally, this forest was a symphony of sound. The constant hum of insects, the rustle of small creatures in the undergrowth, the distant calls of pterosaurs soaring high above, and the earth-shaking footsteps of colossal herbivores. It was a world perpetually in motion, a vibrant, chaotic orchestra of survival. But today something was wrong. An unnatural quiet had settled over the land. The usual chorus of life had faded to a mere whisper. Through this unnervingly silent world, a young ankylosaurus made its way. Let's call him Anky. Anky was not yet fully grown. His body, about the size of a large pig, was covered in bony plates or osteoderms that were still hardening. They formed a mosaic of natural armor across his back and sides, a defense that would one day make him nearly invincible to predators. At the end of his tail was the beginning of what would become a formidable club, a heavy knob of bone that could shatter the leg of a Tyrannosaurus. But for now, he was young and vulnerable. Anky ambled along, his short, sturdy legs carrying him over a carpet of fallen leaves and soft moss. Each step was accompanied by a soft clinking sound as the bony plates of his armor shifted against each other. It was a familiar, comforting sound, but today it seemed unnervingly loud in the profound stillness. He paused, his broad head low to the ground, and sniffed the air. He was searching for his favorite patch of low-growing ferns, but his senses were screaming a different message. danger, it was a strange kind of fear. It wasn't the sharp, immediate terror of a predator scent on the wind. He couldn't smell the musky odor of a carnivore, nor could he hear the telltale heavy tread of a larger dinosaur. There were no warning calls from the smaller, more alert creatures that usually served as the forest's early alarm system. That was the problem? There was nothing? The absolute absence of sound was more terrifying than any roar. He felt a pressure in his chest, a primal instinct telling him to hide, to find shelter, but from what? He scanned the dense foliage with his small eyes, positioned on the sides of his wide head. He saw the gentle sway of giant cycads, their fronds unmoving in the still air. He saw the gnarled trunks of ancient conifers, their bark scarred by time. He saw nothing out of the ordinary, yet the feeling of dread only grew stronger. Even the ever-present cloud of insects that usually buzzed around his head was gone. The air was clear, sterile. Enki continued his slow, cautious journey. He was heading toward a small clearing where a stream trickled through, a place he often visited with his family herd. He hoped to find them there, to find comfort in their numbers and the reassuring presence of the larger, fully grown adults. As he moved, he noticed other subtle signs that something was amiss. A half-eaten fruit lay on the ground, abandoned mid-meal. A nest, usually bustling with chirping hatchlings, was empty and silent. The forest itself seemed to be holding its breath, waiting. Suddenly, the light began to change. At first, it was subtle, as if a large cloud had passed in front of the sun. The dappled patterns on the forest floor merged into a uniform, gloomy shade. But the dimming didn't stop. The world grew darker, and darker still, as if dusk had decided to arrive hours ahead of schedule. The warm, golden light of the Cretaceous sun was replaced by a strange, weak orange glow. Enki stopped and lifted his heavy head, confusion overriding his fear for a moment. The sky above, visible in patches through the canopy, was no longer blue. It was turning a bruised, angry red. He let out a low, questioning grunt, a sound that was swallowed by the immense silence. And then he felt it. A tremor in the ground beneath his feet. It was faint at first, a barely perceptible vibration, but it grew steadily stronger, making the leaves on the ground dance. It was not the familiar thud of another dinosaur walking. This was a deep, resonant hum that seemed to come from the very core of the earth, far off in the distance. A new sound began, breaking the oppressive quiet. It started as a low rumble, like distant thunder, but it grew in volume and intensity, becoming a continuous, deafening roar. It was a sound unlike any Enki had ever heard. It wasn't the sound of an animal or a storm. It was the sound of the world itself groaning in agony. Then came the wind. It wasn't a gentle breeze. It was a sudden, violent gust, a physical blow that swept through the forest like a giant's exhale. It ripped through the canopy, tearing leaves and small branches from the trees. Ancient ferns bent almost to the ground, and the air filled with a whirlwind of debris. Enki instinctively lowered his body, pressing himself against the earth, his armored shell providing some protection from the flying detritus. The silence was shattered for good. The forest, which had been holding its breath, erupted into a cacophony of pure panic. Birds that had been hiding in the high branches burst into the sky, their desperate cries lost in the growing roar. Small mammals and reptiles, driven from their hiding places by the shaking ground and the terrifying wind, scurried in every direction, blind with fear. A herd of hadrosaurs, the peaceful duck-billed dinosaurs, crashed through the undergrowth, their bellows of alarm adding to the chaos. They ran without direction, their only instinct to flee from the unseen, unheard-of terror that was descending upon them. Enki watched them go, frozen in place. The ground was now shaking so violently that it was difficult to stand. The roar from the distance was no longer just a sound. It was a physical force, a pressure that vibrated through his bones. He looked up again at the sky. Through a gap in the thrashing canopy, he saw something that his primitive brain could not comprehend. A new star was burning in the daytime sky. It was a pinprick of brilliant, blinding light, brighter than the sun itself, and it was growing. It was getting bigger and bigger and bigger, consuming the reddish sky. It was not a star. It was a messenger of doom. It was a mountain on fire, falling from the heavens. Something terrible was not just approaching, it had arrived. For Enki, and for every other living thing in that forest, the world was about to end. The silence had been a warning, a final, fleeting moment of peace before the symphony of life was replaced by the roar of extinction. The Cretaceous period was drawing to a close, not with a whisper, but with a cataclysmic bang that would echo through the ages. The forest that went silent was about to be silenced forever. This is just one story, a glimpse into the final moments of a lost world. The impact of that asteroid 66 million years ago triggered a mass extinction event that wiped out around 75% of all species on Earth, including all non-avian dinosaurs. It was a planetary reset button, a dramatic and violent end to the age of reptiles, which ultimately paved the way for the rise of mammals and eventually us. The silence of that Cretaceous forest was the prelude to our own story. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this journey back in time, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more stories from our planet's incredible past. Imagine a world untouched 66 million years ago. A river, a ribbon of life, carves its path through ancient cliffs of red and ochre. The morning sun warms the stone, and the air is thick with the scent of damp earth and cycad leaves. This is a place of peace, a sanctuary where giants gather. Along the riverbank, a herd of hadrosaurs munches on lush ferns, their broad duckbills tearing at the vegetation. A family of triceratops, their formidable horns glinting, lower their heads to drink, the little ones playfully nudging each other. In the distance, a lone tyrannosaurus stalks the horizon, its massive form a silhouette against the hazy sky. But here, at the water's edge, there is only tranquility. A young Parasaurolophus, barely more than a juvenile, steps cautiously to the river. Its crested head tilts, listening to the gentle lapping of the water and the chirps of unseen creatures in the canopy. It dips its muzzle into the cool, clear current, savoring the life-giving liquid. The world is, as it has always been, a predictable cycle of sun and shadow, hunter and hunted, thirst and replenishment. This river is the heart of its small world, a constant, reliable presence. But miles away, in a place beyond the horizon, the sky has already betrayed them. A visitor from the cosmos, a colossal fireball traveling faster than sound, has torn through the atmosphere. It strikes the Earth with a force 1 billion times greater than an atomic bomb. For a few silent, suspended moments at the river, nothing changes. The Parasaurolophus continues to drink, unaware that the planet itself has been mortally wounded. Then the first sign of doom arrives, not from the sky, but from beneath its feet. A tremor, a subtle vibration that quickly grows into a violent shudder. The ground lurches, not like a familiar earthquake, but with a deep, sickening heave. The cliffs that have stood for millennia shed dust and then small rocks, which clatter down the slopes and splash into the river. The dinosaurs startle. The triceratops lift their heads, their frills flared in alarm. The hadrosaurs stop chewing, their low calls turning to anxious bellows. The young Parasaurolophus stumbles back from the water's edge, its own plaintive bleat joining the rising chorus of confusion and fear. The shockwave, a relentless wave of pure energy, races through the bedrock. When it hits the river, the water reacts with impossible violence. The calm surface erupts. It doesn't just ripple, it churns and froths as if a leviathan were thrashing in its depths. The water level seems to swell, surging up the banks in unnatural waves that send the smaller dinosaurs scattering. The young Parasaurolophus, legs trembling, can only watch in terror. This isn't a flood, it's something else, something deeply wrong. The river, the source of life, is convulsing. Then comes the heat. A strange warmth begins to radiate from the water, a sensation that quickly escalates to a searing, unbearable temperature. The river is cooking from the inside out. Tendrils of steam, at first thin and ghostly, begin to rise from the surface. Within moments, they coalesce into a thick, billowing fog that blankets the water, obscuring the opposite bank. The gentle lapping sound is replaced by a hiss, then a furious, rolling boil. The ecosystem collapses in an instant. Fish, which had been darting through the clear water just moments before, now leap into the air in a desperate, futile attempt to escape the scalding depths. They twist and writhe in agony, their silvery scales flashing before they fall back into the boiling cauldron. The river's turtles and ancient crocodilians, creatures that had survived countless ages, dive deep, searching for a cool refuge that no longer exists. They are being boiled alive in their own homes. The air, once fresh, is now heavy with steam and the horrifying smell of cooking flesh. The Parasaurolophus lets out a high, piercing cry of sheer terror. It stumbles backward, its instincts screaming at it to flee, but where? The ground is still shaking and the very air is becoming unbreathable. Its herd is in disarray, a stampede of panic and pain. Some are trampled, others are driven into the boiling river by the sheer force of the terrified mob. The world has descended into a chaotic hellscape. As if the scene were not apocalyptic enough, the sky begins to change. The familiar blue is blotted out by a rapidly descending darkness. But this isn't the darkness of night or a storm cloud. It's a fine gray powder drifting down like a morbid snow. It's ash and pulverized rock, thrown miles into the atmosphere by the impact, now returning to coat the dying world. It settles on the struggling dinosaurs, on the thrashing trees, on the steaming surface of the river. The leaves of the ferns and cycads along the bank begin to droop and blacken as the superheated toxic ash touches them. The trees shudder, not just from the tremors in the ground, but as their own life is extinguished. The sun is gone, veiled by a thick planetary shroud. A terrifying twilight falls, illuminated only by the ghostly glow of the boiling river and the distant, horrifying flicker of spreading fires on the horizon. The air becomes thick and gritty, each breath a struggle, filling the lungs with poison. The young Parasaurolophus stands frozen for a moment, a solitary figure amidst the end of an era. The sounds are a symphony of destruction. The roar of the boiling water, the crash of falling trees, the desperate cries of dying animals, and a new terrifying sound, a deep, constant rumble from the sky itself as more debris begins to rain down. The river, once a symbol of continuity and life, is now a steaming, bubbling tomb. It has become a stark and terrible monument to the catastrophe. It is no longer a sanctuary, but a warning, a terrifying message that has traveled across the land. The end has arrived. It is not a slow decline, but a sudden, violent, and absolute termination. The age of dinosaurs, an epoch that lasted for 150 million years, is being erased in a matter of hours. And for this one young creature standing at the edge of a river that has turned to steam, that end is brutally, terrifyingly real. The world it knew is gone, replaced by a nightmare from which there will be no waking. Deep in a forest of towering ferns and ancient cycads, a mother maiasaura rested. Her name was Maya, and her great broad body was a shield, a living mountain of warmth and protection over her carefully built nest. The nest wasn't just a mound of dirt. It was a woven tapestry of leaves, soft moss, and sun-warmed earth, a cradle for the future. Inside, a clutch of smooth, speckled eggs lay in perfect stillness. They were her world, the culmination of a long journey, the promise of new life. She had tended to this nest for weeks, her heavy body a constant, loving presence. Her deep, humming breaths were a lullaby, a low, rumbling song that vibrated through the ground and into the very shells of her unborn young. It was a song of safety, a promise of the world they would soon join a world of lush green valleys, sparkling rivers, and the calls of their kin. One egg, nestled right in the center, was special to her. She didn't know why, but she often found herself nudging it gently with her broad snout, feeling the faint, almost imperceptible warmth it radiated. This one, she felt, held a spirit as strong and gentle as the morning sun. She imagined a small, curious hatchling, stumbling on wobbly legs, its wide eyes taking in the vast, green world for the first time. She would teach it to find the sweetest ferns, to listen for the distant rumble of a tyrannosaur, and to call out to the herd with a voice that was uniquely its own. Her heart, a massive, powerful drum in her chest, swelled with a love so fierce it was almost painful. This was her purpose. This was everything. But today, the lullaby was interrupted. The ground, usually so solid and dependable beneath her, began to tremble. It started as a faint tremor, a shiver that ran through the roots of the giant trees. Maya lifted her head, her nostrils flaring as she tasted the air. Something was wrong. The familiar sense of damp earth and sweet blossoms were tainted with something acrid, something sharp and unfamiliar. The small feathered creatures that usually chirped in the canopy fell silent. An unnatural stillness descended upon the forest, broken only by the growing, rhythmic shudder of the earth. She shifted her weight, a low growl of unease rumbling in her throat. Her maternal instinct, a force more powerful than any predator, screamed at her to stay, to press her body down harder over her precious clutch. Yet, a primal fear, an ancient terror she had never known, urged her to run. The conflict tore at her, a silent battle waged within the heart of a mother. A sudden, violent gust of wind, hotter than any summer breeze, tore through the clearing. It ripped leaves from the trees and sent a cloud of dust and ash swirling across her nest, coating the beautiful speckled shells in a layer of gray grit. Maya blinked, her large, gentle eyes stinging. She looked toward the horizon, and what she saw stole the air from her massive lungs. The sky, once a familiar, friendly blue, was now a terrifying canvas of angry orange and fiery red. A new star, brighter and more terrible than the sun itself, hung in the heavens, growing larger with every passing second. It wasn't a star. It was an omen, it was the end. The ground bucked and roared. The gentle trembling had become a violent convulsion, shaking the world to its very core. Trees that had stood for centuries groaned and splintered, toppling like fallen soldiers. The river, her herd's lifeblood, churned and frothed, its banks collapsing into the churning water. The quakes were relentless, one after another, each one stronger than the last. Maya let out a cry of pure terror, a sound that was lost in the deafening roar of the world tearing itself apart. Still, she did not move. She pressed herself lower, trying to absorb the shocks, trying to be a living anchor in a world that had come unmoored. Her eggs, her promise, her future, they were all that mattered. Through the chaos, she felt a faint, rhythmic tapping from within one of the shells. It was the central egg, the one that held her heart. Tap, tap, a tiny life, persistent and determined, was trying to break through. It didn't know the sky was on fire. It didn't know the ground was breaking. It only knew the urge to live, to emerge, to meet the mother whose humming it had felt for so long. A surge of desperate hope flooded Maya's being. Life, in the midst of all this destruction, a new life was fighting to begin. She hummed again, her voice trembling but full of love, trying to send one last message of encouragement, one final lullaby. "I'm here," the sound seemed to say. "I'm waiting for you." But the world outside her nest offered no such welcome. The brilliant, terrible star in the sky finally met the earth. A silent, blinding flash of light bleached the world of all color, followed an instant later by a wave of heat so intense it vaporized everything in its path. The forest, the river, the very air ignited. The wave of force hit the hillside like a colossal fist, and Maya's world dissolved into white-hot agony. In her final, fleeting moment of consciousness, she felt no pain, only an overwhelming, all-consuming love for the tiny, tapping life beneath her. She had been a good mother. It was her only thought as oblivion claimed her. Silence returned to the valley, but it was a dead silence. The vibrant green was gone, replaced by a monochrome landscape of gray ash and blackened skeletal trees. The air was thick and choked with soot, and a pale, sickly light filtered through the dense clouds that now shrouded the entire planet. Beneath a newly formed layer of ash and debris, the nest remained, miraculously sheltered by the fossilized impression of the mother who had given her life to protect it. Time passed, days bled into weeks, weeks into months. The sun was a ghost in the sky, unable to pierce the gloom. The world grew cold. The once thriving plants withered and died, and the great herds that had roamed the plains vanished, their thunderous footsteps silenced forever. The age of the dinosaurs was over, snuffed out in a single catastrophic moment. In the cold, dark earth, the tapping in the central egg had long since ceased. The tiny spark of life, so eager to begin, had been extinguished before it could even draw its first breath. The shell remained intact, a perfect, unbroken vessel holding a promise that would never be fulfilled. The little Maiasaura, the one with the strong and gentle spirit, would never stumble on wobbly legs. It would never taste a sweet fern or see the vastness of the world. It would never know its mother's touch or hear her loving calls. It would remain locked in time, a silent testament to a love that was stronger than the end of the world. An egg that would never hatch, cradled forever in the dust of a forgotten age. Imagine, if you will, the world as it was 66 million years ago, a humid, vibrant landscape teeming with life. In a clearing, two small carnivores, perhaps dromaeosaurs, feathered and fierce, are locked in a desperate struggle. Their world, for this fleeting moment, is defined by the prize between them, the carcass of a small herbivore. Every snap of their jaws, every slash of their sickle-like claws, is a testament to the brutal, elegant dance of survival that has governed life for eons. They are the products of millions of years of evolution, finely tuned predators whose every instinct screams to fight, to dominate, to eat. Beneath their feet, the earth offers a subtle, persistent hum, a tremor. To them, it's nothing new. The world is a dynamic place, full of groans and shifts. They've felt quakes before. Their focus remains absolute, locked on the rival before them, on the meal that promises another day of existence. The distant rumble, a low growl from the horizon, is just background noise in the symphony of their savage world. It is no more concerning than the buzz of a prehistoric insect or the rustle of leaves in the canopy above. Hunger is the only truth that matters. Their instincts, honed for combat and the hunt, are deaf to the approaching apocalypse. They are masters of their small domain, and in their minds, this battle is the most important event in the universe. But then the universe responds. The rumble is no longer distant. It's a physical force, a wave of pressure that slams into the clearing. It's not a sound anymore. It's a tangible thing that rips through the air. The ground heaves violently, not just a tremor, but a convulsion. In an instant, the two combatants are thrown from their feet, their vicious ballet brutally interrupted. They tumble through the dirt and ferns, disoriented. The prized carcass, the object of their life-or-death struggle, rolls away unceremoniously, forgotten. Dust and debris spiral into the air, choking the scene in a brown haze. Their world has been literally upended. They scramble back to their feet, but the instinct to fight is gone, extinguished. They look up. The sky, a familiar canvas of blue and white, is now ablaze. A flash of impossible, searing brightness paints the heavens, brighter than 1,000 suns. It's a light that carries no warmth, only a terrifying, sterile power. It silhouettes the giant ferns and cycads in stark, ghostly relief. The world holds its breath for a silent, agonizing second. The birds have stopped singing. The insects have gone quiet. The only sound is the ringing in their own ears. They are no longer predators. They are witnesses. And then comes the heat. A wave of scorching air washes over the clearing, instantly parching their throats and stinging their eyes. It's a dry, oppressive heat that feels like standing in the mouth of a volcano. The very air seems to burn. Leaves on the trees curl and blacken in an instant. Just as quickly as it arrived, the intense heat is replaced by an unnatural chill, and a powerful shockwave follows, flattening vegetation and sending a hurricane of debris flying. The two dinosaurs are knocked down again, but this time, something has fundamentally changed within them. They look at each other. Where moments before there was murderous intent, there is now a shared, naked terror. The complex wiring of predator and rival has been short-circuited, overridden by a single primal command that dwarfs all others: flee. Hunger is a forgotten luxury. Territory is a meaningless concept. The battle, once the center of their existence, is now an absurd memory from a different lifetime. They are no longer dromaeosaurs fighting for a meal. They are just two living things desperate to escape an unperceivable, incomprehensible doom. Without a second glance at the carcass, without a growl or a snarl, they turn. Not against each other, but together, in the same direction away from the horrifying light in the sky. They scramble, their powerful legs pumping, not with the grace of a hunter, but with the frantic, clumsy desperation of the hunted. They seek shelter, a cave, a dense thicket, any haven from the sky that has turned against them. Their instincts, the very tools that made them such successful predators, are now screaming a single, unified message of pure, absolute fear. This wasn't a rival predator. This wasn't a territorial dispute or a challenge for dominance. This was something else entirely, something alien. Something that didn't belong to their world. An event so colossal, so far beyond their comprehension, that it had shattered the very rules of nature. Something larger than their planet had arrived, uninvited. As they fled side by side, these two former enemies were united in the terrifying knowledge that their world was ending. The battle for the carcass, the battle for dominance, the battle for their next meal, none of it mattered anymore. The only battle left was for survival itself, and it was a battle they, and almost all life on Earth, were about to lose. The last battle instinct was not to fight, but to run from the end of the world. Imagine a world untouched by time, where giants walked the Earth. A vast herd of sauropods, colossal creatures with necks like cranes and bodies the size of small hills, grazed peacefully near the base of a mountain. This mountain was an ancient sentinel, a landmark that had stood silent and unchanging for millions of years. For generations of these gentle giants, it was simply part of the scenery, a constant backdrop to their lives of munching on high branches and migrating across endless plains. But this morning was different. Something was wrong. It began as a subtle vibration, a low hum that resonated through the solace of their massive feet. At first, it was easy to dismiss, perhaps the distant rumble of a stampede or a far-off storm. But the hum grew into a deep, guttural growl that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the world. The ground, once so solid and dependable, shuddered beneath them. Small pebbles, disturbed from their ancient rest, began to dance and skitter down the slopes. The sauropods paused their grazing, their huge heads lifting from the treetops, their dark, placid eyes blinking in confusion. A young titanosaur, barely an adult and still dwarfed by the true elders of the herd, looked up at the mountain. He'd never known it to do anything but stand there. Now he saw thin, spidery cracks racing across its sheer rock faces like lightning bolts frozen in stone. A fine powder, the dust of ages, puffed from these new fissures as if the mountain itself was exhaling a long-held breath. The air, usually clean and filled with the scent of pine and damp earth, became thick and gritty. The other dinosaurs were growing restless now, their low rumbles of contentment replaced by anxious bellows that echoed across the valley. Without any further warning, the growl escalated into a deafening roar. It wasn't the sound of an animal, but the sound of the world breaking apart. A massive section of the mountain, a slab of rock 1,000 feet high, groaned in protest and then sheared away from the main peak. For a heart-stopping moment, it hung suspended in the air, a city-sized chunk of granite defying gravity. Then, with a cataclysmic crash that shook the heavens, it plunged into the valley below. The impact sent a shockwave of displaced air and debris blasting outwards, flattening trees and kicking up a colossal cloud of dust that blotted out the sun. The herd panicked. Their calls of confusion turned into bellowing cries of pure terror. They turned to run, a chaotic stampede of multi-ton bodies crashing through the forest, their powerful legs churning the ground into mud. The young titanosaur, swept along in the frantic retreat, risked a glance back over his shoulder. The sky above the wounded mountain was no longer blue. It was flickering with a strange, unholy glow, a pulsating light from somewhere far, far beyond the horizon. It painted the churning dust clouds in shades of orange and red, like a sunset on fire. But it was the feeling, more than the sight or sound, that truly terrified him. The vibrations pulsing through the ground were no longer random tremors. They had a rhythm, a steady, pounding beat like a colossal drum. It was a message, an ominous signal traveling through the crust of the planet from an unknown, distant source. It spoke of immense power and unimaginable change. The world they had known, the stable, predictable world of seasons and migrations, was trembling to its very core. This wasn't just a landslide. This was a beginning. The beginning of the end. The stampeding herd didn't know where they were going. They only knew they had to get away. Away from the groaning mountain, away from the flickering sky, away from the rhythmic heartbeat of a dying world. The young titanosaur ran with them, his own heart pounding in time with the terrible vibrations. The air was choked with dust, making every breath a struggle. The familiar landscape was now a nightmarish vision of falling rock and splintered trees. The rules of their existence, so simple and unchanging, had been shattered in an instant. As they fled, the phenomena only grew stranger. The distant glow in the sky intensified, pulsing faster and brighter. New tremors shook the ground, not just from the mountain, but from all directions, as if the entire continent were a drumhead being struck. The titanosaur could feel a deep, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate inside his own bones. The elders of the herd, who had seen countless seasons and survived untold dangers, were just as terrified as the young. Their deep, rumbling calls were no longer commands or warnings, but cries of pure, unadulterated fear. This was more than a collapsing mountain. This was a planetary event, a cataclysm on a scale they couldn't possibly comprehend. The ground beneath their feet, the sky above their heads, the very air they breathed, it was all turning against them. The young titanosaur felt a profound sense of loss, a sorrow for the world that was vanishing before his eyes. The tranquil valley, the silent mountain, the predictable rhythm of their lives all gone, replaced by chaos and a terrifying unknown future. The vibrations from beyond the horizon grew stronger, the drumbeat of doom quickening its pace. Whatever was coming, it was vast, powerful, and utterly indifferent to the lives of the giants who had ruled the planet for so long. They were no longer masters of their domain. They were just refugees, fleeing a catastrophe they couldn't name. As the young titanosaur continued his desperate flight, one thought echoed in his mind. A thought shared by every creature in the terrified herd: the world would never be the same again. The age of dinosaurs was facing a dawn unlike any other, a dawn of fire and dust, heralding a long and terrible night from which they might never awaken. The mountain's groan was just the first note in a symphony of destruction, and the main chorus was yet to come.